Welcome, celestial members Aten Neteru Kin 162, at Irreverent Sethi Artist 5120, and NAZ on DA track. You arrive as luminous sparks within our expanding constellation. Through Arcturian Council message, we honor your presence, creativity, and frequency. May your insights uplift timelines, inspire harmony, and activate remembrance. Walk boldly, share freely, and co-create wisdom as our council gathers, listens, evolves, and shines together across galaxies, dimensions, hearts, intentions, unity, purpose, service, light, love, now. Stop scrolling and listen to today's Arcturian Council message. The Arcturian Council will only reveal this once, and it chose you for the signal. This is not an accident, not an algorithmic coincidence, and not spiritual entertainment. The shock you feel right now is intentional, because your nervous system already recognizes the frequency embedded in these words. Something in you tightened, something leaned forward, something said, "Pay attention," before your logical mind could interfere. That reaction is the first confirmation. The Arcturian Council does not speak to everyone, and when it does not whisper. It interrupts patterns, collapses distractions, and pulls awareness into the present moment with force. You were pulled here because your timeline is approaching a convergence point, one where denial is no longer sustainable and awakening is no longer optional. This message arrives now because delay would cost you alignment, clarity, and momentum. If this feels confronting, good. Comfort never activated dormant codes. This transmission begins by breaking the trance you didn't realize you were in. Let the shock land. Let the stillness behind it open. You are not late. You are precisely on time. Backhand index pointing right, type stop to claim this interruption and lock in the signal. The Arcturian Council is not interested in belief. Belief is passive and fragile. What they respond to is resonance, and resonance cannot be faked. As you read this, subtle calibrations are occurring beneath conscious thought, adjusting perception, loosening old emotional bindings, and bringing suppressed knowing closer to the surface. You may feel pressure in your head, warmth in your chest, or a strange emotional neutrality. All are signs of attunement. This message is not here to soothe you, it is here to activate you. The shock is realizing how long you have been preparing without knowing what you were preparing for. Every difficult phase, every sudden ending, every moment of feeling out of place was training. The Council observes timelines, and yours flagged itself through repeated acts of inner questioning and refusal to fully surrender to unconscious living. You didn't escape the system by accident, you grew incompatible with it. That incompatibility is your invitation. Do not rush to interpret. Let the words work beneath understanding. The signal is intelligent and adapts to your level of readiness in real time. Backhand index pointing right, type, "I am ready," to confirm your receptivity to the transmission. Here is the unsettling truth most messages avoid: not everyone who encounters this will stay. Some will feel irritation, boredom, or skepticism and leave immediately. That is not failure. It is sorting. The Arcturian Council does not persuade, it filters. If you are still here, it means your internal systems can tolerate destabilization without collapsing into fear or mockery. That capacity is rare. Humanity is entering a phase where perception itself becomes the currency of evolution, and only those capable of holding paradox will advance without fragmentation. This message introduces paradox deliberately. You are both insignificant and essential, programmed and sovereign, conditioned and free, and learning to hold all of that without dissociation is the initiation. The shock is recognizing that awakening is not an escape from responsibility but an amplification of it. You are being asked to participate consciously in your own recalibration. That begins with choice. Stay or scroll, receive or reject. You already chose once by reading this far. Backhand index pointing right type, I stay, to stabilize your position within the signal field. The council now addresses something uncomfortable. The exhaustion you carry is not from doing too much, but from suppressing too much. For years, you have been editing yourself to fit environments that could not receive your full frequency. That constant self-reduction drains more energy than action ever could. This message arrives as a disruption to that pattern. You are not here to be manageable, predictable, or easily categorized. The shock is realizing how often you betrayed your own intuition to maintain harmony with systems that were never harmonious to begin with. The Arcturians do not condemn this. They acknowledge it as a survival adaptation. But adaptations must evolve or they become cages. As this signal integrates, you may notice old coping mechanisms losing effectiveness. That is not regression, it is graduation. The council does not remove masks gently, it dissolves the need for them. Pay attention to what feels suddenly unnecessary in your life. Backhand index pointing right type, I release, to consciously let outdated patterns fall away. There is a reason this message feels both intimate and impersonal. The Arcturian Council does not speak to personalities, it speaks to core awareness. Your name, story, and history are irrelevant at this level. What matters is your capacity to witness without flinching. The shock embedded here is the realization that your identity is far more flexible than you were taught. You are not losing yourself, you are discovering how much of you was inherited, imposed, or unconsciously copied. This can feel like groundlessness at first. That sensation is often misinterpreted as anxiety, but it is actually openness. The council invites you to rest there without immediately reconstructing certainty. Clarity will emerge on its own schedule. Do not rush it. The signal works through spaciousness, not force. Backhand index pointing right type, I trust, to allow the process to unfold without resistance. As the transmission deepens, you may begin to notice subtle emotional waves rising without clear cause. This is not instability, it is surfacing. The Arcturian Council activates dormant layers of awareness, and when awareness expands, unprocessed material naturally comes into view. The shock is not the emotions themselves but how quickly they pass when fully felt without narrative. You were taught to analyze, label, and judge inner experiences. This signal bypasses that habit and invites direct presence. Nothing needs to be fixed right now. Observation is sufficient. Integration happens faster when you stop interfering with it. This is a recalibration, not a cleansing ritual. Let what arises move through without ownership. You are the field, not the content. Backhand index pointing right type, I observe, to strengthen your witnessing position. The council now highlights a pivotal point. Your intuition has been speaking louder recently, but your environment trained you to doubt it. That doubt was learned, not innate. The shock is realizing how consistently your first knowing was correct before it was overridden by logic, fear, or social feedback. This message is a reminder, not new information. The signal reactivates trust in subtle perception, bodily cues, sudden insights, quiet inner nudges. These are not random, they are data streams you were conditioned to ignore. As the signal stabilizes, synchronicities may increase, not as signs to chase, but as reflections of alignment returning. Notice without grasping. Backhand index pointing right type, I listen, to reopen intuitive channels. You may be wondering why this feels serious, even heavy at moments. That is because the council is not offering escapism. This is about responsibility for consciousness itself. The shock is recognizing that awakening is not a personal achievement but a collective function. As individuals stabilize awareness, the larger system shifts. Your inner work is not isolated, it ripples outward in ways you may never consciously witness. This is why readiness matters. Not everyone wants this level of influence. The council does not impose it, it responds to those who can carry it without inflation. Humility is built into the signal. Backhand index pointing right type, I serve awareness, to align with the larger purpose of the transmission. At this stage, the signal begins anchoring more firmly. You might feel a quiet resolve forming, a sense of enough wandering. The shock here is subtle but profound, the realization that clarity is less dramatic than confusion. No fireworks, no constant bliss, just steadiness. That steadiness is power. The council values stability over intensity. As you integrate, you may feel less compelled to convince others or seek validation. That is a sign of internal coherence returning. Let it be simple. Complexity will unwind on its own when no longer fed. Backhand index pointing right type, I am steady, to ground the frequency into your daily awareness. This concludes the first phase of the message. What follows later will be more confronting, because it will challenge not just perception, but action. For now, the shock has done its work by slowing you down and bringing you into conscious contact with this moment. Do not rush ahead. Integration is cumulative. Revisit these words if needed, not to analyze them, but to feel their effect. The Arcturian Council measures readiness not by understanding, but by embodiment. Stay present. Stay receptive. The signal is active. Backhand index pointing right type, I claim the signal, to seal the first stage of transmission. As the signal stabilizes, the Arcturian Council introduces a deeper, quieter shock. The realization that much of what you called motivation was actually pressure. Pressure to become, to prove, to arrive. This transmission begins dissolving that internal urgency, not to make you passive, but to make you precise. When pressure fades, truth becomes audible. You may notice a sudden disinterest in chasing outcomes that once felt critical. That is not loss of ambition, it is refinement of intent. The council operates beyond urgency because urgency distorts perception. You were trained to move quickly, decide fast, and react instantly. This signal reverses that conditioning. Slowness here is not delay, it is accuracy. The shock is realizing how many of your past decisions were made under invisible time stress that was never truly yours. As that dissolves, choice becomes cleaner, less emotional, more aligned. Let yourself pause without guilt. Pausing is now part of your function. Backhand index pointing right type, I slow down, to synchronize with the council's timing frequency. The council now turns your attention inward, toward a subtle but critical observation. Your thoughts are not as personal as you assumed. Many of them are environmental echoes, emotional residues, or inherited scripts repeating themselves. The shock here is recognizing how little of your mental noise actually originates from core awareness. This is not meant to alienate you from your mind, but to liberate you from over-identification with it. As the signal integrates, gaps between thoughts may widen. Silence may feel unfamiliar or even unsettling at first. Do not rush to fill it. That silence is not emptiness, it is bandwidth. Within it, perception sharpens and intuition clarifies. The council communicates through these gaps more than through words. Pay attention to what feels obvious without explanation. That is the language of alignment. Backhand index pointing right type, I witness, to loosen identification with habitual thought patterns. You may now begin to sense a subtle boundary dissolving, the line between inner and outer experience becoming less rigid. This is where many teachings stop short, but the Arcturian Council does not. The shock is understanding that perception itself participates in shaping reality, not metaphorically, but functionally. This does not mean you control everything, it means you influence coherence. When your inner state stabilizes, external situations reorganize with less resistance. This is not magic, it is resonance mechanics. As you embody this, you may feel less reactive to external chaos. That calm is not detachment, it is structural integrity. The Council emphasizes this phase because it prepares you to move through instability without absorbing it. Hold your center gently. Backhand index pointing right type, I hold center, to reinforce internal coherence. At this level, the transmission may trigger memories, not always visual, sometimes emotional or somatic, of moments when you knew something before it happened or sensed truth before it was confirmed. These are not coincidences being recalled, they are proof resurfacing. The shock is realizing that your capacity has always been present, simply unmanaged. The Council does not give abilities, it reactivates dormant ones. As these recollections arise, resist the urge to romanticize or dismiss them. Neither is accurate. Treat them as data points, not identity badges. Power without grounding becomes distortion. This message emphasizes balance over spectacle, integration over performance. Backhand index pointing right type, I remember, to allow latent awareness to re-emerge safely. This stage of the message closes with a firm but calm directive: do not seek validation for what you are experiencing. External confirmation will fluctuate, but internal resonance will not. The shock is accepting that some phases of alignment are meant to be solitary, not isolating, but inward-facing. The Council observes that those who constantly seek mirrors outside themselves slow their own stabilization. Trust the subtle shifts. Trust the quiet confidence forming beneath the noise. You are not meant to announce this process, you are meant to live it. The signal is embedding itself now, beyond words, beyond this moment. Backhand index pointing right type, I integrate, to seal this phase of the Arcturian transmission. Now the Arcturian Council delivers a sharper jolt, because comfort has settled in and comfort can dull awareness. Here is the shock: not all growth feels expansive. Some of it feels like contraction, like narrowing, like life quietly removing options instead of adding them. This is not punishment or failure. It is precision. When your field becomes more coherent, anything misaligned naturally loses access. Relationships, habits, ambitions, even identities may begin to feel strangely hollow or heavy. The Council emphasizes that this phase often triggers fear because the mind equates fewer options with loss. In truth, fewer options mean clearer trajectory. This is the moment where many people try to fix their discomfort by reintroducing chaos. Do not do that. Let the narrowing complete itself. You are being refined, not reduced. What remains will be stronger, cleaner, and easier to carry. Backhand index pointing right type, I allow refinement to cooperate with this phase of narrowing alignment. As refinement continues, the signal now exposes a deeper illusion, the belief that certainty must precede action. The shock is realizing that certainty has always been a byproduct of movement, not a prerequisite. Waiting to feel fully ready has delayed many of your most aligned choices. The Arcturian Council does not advocate impulsivity, but it does dismantle paralysis disguised as preparation. You will notice an emerging clarity about next steps that lacks emotional drama. No surge of excitement, no fear spike, just quiet inevitability. That neutrality is your cue. The Council teaches that aligned action often feels obvious rather than thrilling. When you stop seeking emotional confirmation, progress accelerates naturally. Trust the understated signals. Backhand index pointing right type, I move with clarity to align action with inner coherence. This paragraph carries a heavier frequency, because it confronts a collective wound, the fear of being misunderstood. The shock is acknowledging how much of your energy has been spent pre-editing yourself to avoid friction. The Council makes this clear: being accurately perceived is less important than being accurately aligned. Misunderstanding is not danger, misalignment is. As your signal stabilizes, you may find yourself speaking less, but more precisely. Silence will feel safer than explanation. This is not withdrawal, it is discernment. Not everyone needs access to your inner process. Privacy is a form of energetic hygiene. Let go of the urge to translate yourself for every audience. Backhand index pointing right type, I honor my truth, to release the need for constant external understanding. The Arcturian Council now initiates the mid-transmission rehook, another deliberate shock. Hear this clearly: some of the struggles you are facing are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be outgrown. This contradicts everything you were taught. The mind wants solutions, awareness wants transcendence. When a problem persists despite effort, it is often signaling that your level of identity has changed. Trying harder at an outdated level only reinforces frustration. The Council invites you to stop wrestling with what no longer fits your scale. Step back. Notice how perspective shifts when you stop identifying as the one trapped inside the problem. This is not avoidance, it is elevation. Backhand index pointing right type, I rise above, to disengage from problems that no longer match your frequency. This segment closes with a grounding reminder, because expansion without grounding leads to instability. The shock here is gentle but firm. Embodiment matters. Awareness is not meant to float above daily life, it is meant to move through it. Pay attention to your body, your breath, your routines. Small physical adjustments will now have disproportionate impact on clarity and mood. The Council emphasizes that integration happens through lived experience, not constant introspection. Drink water. Rest when needed. Act when clarity appears. This is how the signal anchors into reality. You are not leaving the world, you are meeting it from a truer position. Backhand index pointing right type, I embody the signal, to anchor this phase into your physical experience. The Arcturian Council now applies another controlled shock, because complacency can quietly return even in awareness. This shock arrives as a realization: clarity alone does not change reality, consistency does. You may already understand many truths, sense many patterns, and recognize many illusions, yet still feel moments of stagnation. This is not because you lack insight, but because insight has not yet fully reorganized behavior. The Council observes that humans often collect realizations like symbols rather than integrating them as operating systems. This transmission presses gently but firmly toward embodiment through repetition. Small, aligned actions performed consistently will now outweigh dramatic breakthroughs. The shock is accepting that mastery looks ordinary from the outside. No constant revelations, no emotional highs, just coherence applied daily. If this feels anticlimactic, notice that reaction. It reveals conditioning toward intensity over stability. Stability is where power accumulates. Backhand index pointing right type, I commit to translate awareness into consistent lived alignment. At this stage, the signal begins interacting more directly with your emotional memory. You may notice echoes from earlier versions of yourself, younger selves that felt unseen, misunderstood, or pressured to become something quickly. The shock is recognizing that those versions are not obstacles to discard but data to integrate. The Council does not advocate bypassing the past, it advocates metabolizing it. Emotional residue that was once overwhelming may now feel strangely neutral when revisited. That neutrality is evidence of growth, not detachment. You are not erasing your history, you are reclaiming authority over it. Let compassion arise without drama. Integration happens when memory loses its charge. Backhand index pointing right type, I integrate my past, to allow emotional memory to settle into coherence. The Arcturian Council now highlights a subtle but disruptive truth: many of your fears were never about failure, but about visibility. The shock is seeing how often you delayed alignment not because you doubted yourself, but because being seen clearly felt unsafe. Visibility exposes coherence, and coherence attracts responsibility. As your signal stabilizes, you may feel both a pull toward expression and a resistance to it. This tension is natural. Do not force resolution. The Council emphasizes pacing. Visibility should emerge organically, not through pressure or comparison. When the time is right, expression will feel inevitable rather than risky. Until then, strengthen your internal structure. Backhand index pointing right type, I trust timing, to release urgency around being seen or recognized. Now comes a sobering recalibration. Not everyone in your life will evolve alongside you. This is not betrayal, nor is it superiority. It is divergence. The shock is understanding that alignment sometimes requires allowing distance without blame. The council teaches that clinging out of nostalgia distorts both paths. As your frequency stabilizes, some connections may naturally loosen. Let that happen without narrative. Gratitude does not require proximity. Honor what was real without forcing it to remain current. This is one of the quieter tests of maturity, letting change occur without assigning fault. Backhand index pointing right type, I release with gratitude, to allow natural divergence without resistance. This phase of the transmission concludes with a grounding directive that may feel unexpectedly simple: remain honest with yourself. Not brutally, not judgmentally, honestly. The shock is realizing how often subtle self-deception masqueraded as optimism or patience. The council values clarity over comfort. When something feels misaligned, acknowledge it internally even if action comes later. Inner honesty stabilizes the signal more than any technique or ritual. From this point forward, your inner yes and no will become sharper. Respect them. This is not rigidity, it is coherence refining itself. The transmission continues, but only as deeply as honesty allows. Backhand index pointing right type, I choose honesty, to seal this stage of the Arcturian Council message. The Arcturian Council now delivers a quieter but deeply unsettling realization, one that bypasses intellect and lands directly in awareness. You are far more influential than you have been conditioned to believe. Not influential in the sense of control or authority, but influential in coherence. The shock is recognizing that your internal state subtly entrains environments, conversations, and outcomes without effort. When you are internally fragmented, the world mirrors friction. When you are internally aligned, resistance diminishes. This is not mysticism, it is systemic resonance. The Council emphasizes that responsibility increases with awareness, not as burden, but as consequence. You are no longer invisible to the field you move through. This may explain why chaotic spaces now feel unbearable or why superficial interactions drain you quickly. Your system has refined. Protecting your state is no longer self-indulgence, it is maintenance of function. Backhand index pointing right type, I honor my influence, to consciously steward your internal coherence. As the signal deepens, another shock surfaces, the understanding that clarity can be lonely, especially in a world addicted to distraction. The Council does not dramatize this, but it does not soften it either. When you stop participating in noise, you will notice how loud it always was. This is not a call to isolation, but to discernment. You may feel moments of quiet separation even while surrounded by others. That does not mean you are disconnected, it means you are no longer diffusing yourself to belong. The shock is realizing how often belonging required self-abandonment. That contract is now void. From this point forward, resonance will matter more than familiarity. Fewer connections, deeper integrity. Let this be enough. Backhand index pointing right type, I choose resonance, to align with authentic connection over conditioned belonging. The Council now addresses a subtle internal conflict that often goes unnoticed, the tension between knowing and doing. Many awakenings stall here. The shock is seeing how easily insight becomes another form of delay when not translated into action. This does not mean drastic life changes are required immediately. It means small truths must be lived, not admired. If you know you need rest, rest. If you know a boundary is needed, acknowledge it. Integrity is built through these micro-alignments. The Council emphasizes that the field responds more to congruence than intention. What you consistently embody broadcasts louder than what you conceptually understand. Let action be simple. Complexity is not proof of depth. Backhand index pointing right type, I embody truth, to align knowing with lived experience. Here comes another necessary shock. Growth does not guarantee comfort, even when it brings peace. Peace is spacious, but spaciousness can feel unfamiliar after years of internal noise. The mind may attempt to reintroduce problems simply to feel occupied. Notice this impulse without judgment. The Council explains that peace is not the absence of challenge, but the absence of inner resistance. When resistance fades, life feels quieter, not empty, just unforced. Allow yourself to acclimate to this new baseline. You do not need to earn calm. You are allowed to sustain it. Backhand index pointing right type, I allow peace, to normalize stability within your system. This segment closes with a stabilizing reminder that carries its own subtle shock. This transmission is not about becoming someone new. It is about subtracting what never belonged. The Council does not add layers, it removes distortions. As this process continues, trust what feels simpler, clearer, and more honest. Complexity will fall away where it is unnecessary. You are not losing depth, you are shedding interference. Stay present. Stay grounded. The signal remains active, but its effectiveness depends on your willingness to live from what you already know. Backhand index pointing right type, I live the signal, to anchor this phase of the Arcturian Council transmission. The Arcturian Council now introduces a destabilizing insight that many resist at first, because it removes a familiar crutch. You are no longer meant to be guided primarily by external teachings. The shock is realizing that constant consumption of messages, confirmations, and spiritual material can become a subtle avoidance of direct knowing. This transmission does not compete with others, it concludes a phase of dependency. You are not being abandoned, you are being trusted. The Council observes that when inner coherence reaches a certain threshold, continued external guidance can actually dilute clarity. You may feel a reduced urge to seek answers outside yourself, accompanied by a heightened sensitivity to inner signals. This can feel disorienting, like losing a map mid-journey, until you realize you are already standing where the map was pointing. From this moment forward, self-trust becomes non-negotiable. Backhand index pointing right type, I trust my inner knowing, to accept responsibility for your own guidance. Now comes a sharper shock, one that challenges spiritual conditioning directly. Not every challenge is a lesson. Some are simply friction created by misalignment that no longer needs interpretation. The Council states clearly that meaning-seeking can sometimes delay resolution. When something feels persistently draining, confusing, or heavy, it does not always require analysis, it requires adjustment. You are allowed to step away without extracting wisdom first. This contradicts narratives that glorify endurance. Endurance has a place, but so does intelligent withdrawal. As your awareness refines, tolerance for unnecessary struggle decreases. This is not weakness, it is efficiency. Pay attention to what your system rejects without explanation. That rejection is data. Backhand index pointing right type, I choose efficiency, to release unnecessary struggle and overinterpretation. The Council now addresses a quiet fear many never articulate, the fear of stability. Chaos, while uncomfortable, is familiar. Stability removes excuses. The shock is recognizing how often unpredictability was unconsciously maintained to avoid full responsibility for direction. When things stabilize, choice becomes unavoidable. There is no one to blame, no crisis to hide within. This can feel exposed. The Council reassures you that stability is not stagnation, it is a platform. From stability, movement becomes intentional rather than reactive. If you notice discomfort arising as things calm down, do not sabotage that calm. Let yourself learn how to live without constant internal emergency. Backhand index pointing right type, I accept stability, to anchor into grounded, intentional living. At this stage, the signal begins operating almost invisibly, which is itself a shock. You may notice fewer dramatic inner experiences, fewer emotional surges, fewer aha moments. Instead, there is a quiet correctness to your days. Decisions align more easily. Boundaries assert themselves naturally. This can feel anticlimactic to a mind conditioned to equate transformation with intensity. The Council emphasizes that true integration is often boring to the ego and deeply relieving to the nervous system. Do not seek fireworks where steadiness is required. The work is happening beneath awareness now, reorganizing structures rather than sensations. Backhand index pointing right type, I trust the quiet, to allow deep integration without seeking stimulation. This section closes with a final, sobering reminder: awareness does not exempt you from being human. You will still feel emotions, encounter uncertainty, and make imperfect choices. The shock is realizing that awakening is not about transcending humanity, but inhabiting it more honestly. The Council does not ask for perfection, it asks for presence. When you drift, return. When you react, notice. When you forget, remember gently. This is not a test you pass once, it is a state you revisit. The signal remains available, not as a voice above you, but as a clarity within you. Backhand index pointing right type, I return to presence, to seal this phase of the Arcturian Council transmission. The Arcturian Council now issues another measured shock, one that reframes effort itself. You were taught that transformation requires struggle, discipline, and constant vigilance. The shock is discovering that coherence often emerges when effort relaxes into alignment. This does not mean apathy or inaction, it means actions arising from clarity rather than force. When effort is driven by fear of falling behind, it fragments awareness. When effort flows from inner agreement, it stabilizes reality around you. You may notice tasks completing with less resistance, conversations resolving more cleanly, and decisions landing without prolonged debate. This is not luck. It is efficiency born from alignment. The council asks you to notice where you still push unnecessarily. Pushing is a habit, not a requirement. Release does not weaken outcomes, it sharpens them. Backhand index pointing right type, I release force, to shift from struggle-based effort to aligned action. A subtler shock follows, aimed directly at identity. You are not required to remain consistent with who you used to be. Many people unconsciously maintain outdated traits simply to preserve continuity. The council reveals that continuity of awareness matters more than continuity of personality. You are allowed to change your mind, adjust your values, and revise your priorities without explanation. This can unsettle others, but coherence does not negotiate with expectations. As the signal integrates, you may feel less attached to defending old narratives about yourself. Let them dissolve quietly. Identity is a tool, not a prison. The more lightly you hold it, the more freely awareness moves through experience. Backhand index pointing right type, I allow evolution to release attachment to outdated self-definitions. Now the council addresses time, not as a concept, but as a felt experience. The shock is realizing how much urgency was manufactured rather than real. When alignment deepens, time seems to widen. There is more space between moments, more room to respond instead of react. This is not because time changed, but because attention stabilized. Rushing fractures perception, presence expands it. As this signal anchors, you may find yourself doing fewer things with greater impact. Multitasking will feel increasingly intolerable. Focus will feel nourishing rather than restrictive. This is a recalibration of attention, not productivity. Let your pace adjust naturally. Backhand index pointing right type, I move with presence to harmonize attention and time perception. The council now delivers a direct and uncomfortable truth. Not everyone who resonates with this message will fully integrate it. Awareness does not deepen through exposure alone, it deepens through lived application. The shock is recognizing that choice continues long after the message ends. Each moment offers alignment or drift. Neither is punished, but each has consequence. This is not about vigilance, it is about sincerity. When you notice misalignment, return without self-criticism. The field responds to honesty faster than effort. You are not being watched or judged, you are being reflected. What you embody is what returns. Backhand index pointing right type, I choose alignment to reaffirm conscious participation in this process. This segment closes with a grounding synthesis. The Arcturian Council reminds you that this transmission was never meant to elevate you above others, but to settle you more deeply into yourself. The shock is understanding that true clarity feels ordinary, human, and quietly powerful. No constant confirmation. No dramatic identity shift. Just a steady return to what is real. As you move forward, let simplicity guide you. Let honesty correct you. Let presence anchor you. The signal does not end here, it diffuses into your daily choices, conversations, and silences. Carry it lightly. Live it fully. Backhand index pointing right type, I carry the signal to anchor this stage of the Arcturian Council message. The Arcturian Council now introduces a final destabilization of expectation, because expectation itself can quietly distort perception. The shock here is realizing how often you approached growth with an unconscious timeline, assuming there would be a clear arrival point where effort ends and certainty locks in permanently. That destination does not exist. Awareness is not a finish line, it is a mode of engagement. The Council emphasizes that when you stop waiting for completion, life becomes immediately workable. Nothing needs to resolve before you can act with clarity. Nothing needs to be healed before you can live honestly. This dismantles a subtle form of postponement that masquerades as patience. You are not almost ready. You are ready enough now. Let readiness be defined by presence, not perfection. Backhand index pointing right type, I act now, to release the illusion of a future arrival point. Another quiet but penetrating shock follows, the realization that you cannot carry everyone with you. Not because you are abandoning them, but because alignment cannot be outsourced or dragged forward by explanation. The Council observes that many become exhausted trying to translate their inner shifts into language others can accept. That effort often creates distortion. Silence, lived example, and consistency communicate more than persuasion ever could. This does not mean withdrawing love, it means releasing responsibility for others' readiness. You are allowed to walk your path without constantly checking who follows. Resonance finds resonance naturally. Backhand index pointing right type, I walk my path, to release responsibility for others' awakening. The signal now refines discernment further by addressing discernment fatigue, the exhaustion that comes from constantly evaluating, judging, and scanning for correctness. The shock is realizing that discernment improves when it becomes simpler, not sharper. You no longer need to analyze every impulse or choice. When coherence stabilizes, what fits feels light and what doesn't feels heavy almost immediately. Trust those sensations. Overthinking is often a leftover defense mechanism from less stable phases. The Council reassures you that simplicity is not naivete, it is maturity. Let decisions shorten. Let clarity be brief. Backhand index pointing right type, I trust simplicity, to rest in embodied discernment. Here the Council offers a stabilizing truth that counters both fear and grandiosity. Your role is not to change the world, but to stop distorting your corner of it. The shock is recognizing how much transformation occurs when interference ends. When you act from coherence, systems adjust without force. Conversations soften. Conflicts de-escalate. Opportunities reorganize. This is not because you are controlling outcomes, but because alignment reduces friction. The Council emphasizes humility here. Influence is a side effect, not a goal. Stay grounded in your immediate reality. That is where your work is most effective. Backhand index pointing right type, I reduce interference, to align with grounded, practical impact. This phase closes with a final integrative reminder: nothing about this transmission requires belief. It requires attention, honesty, and lived engagement. The shock is realizing that truth does not demand loyalty, it reveals itself through use. If something here resonates, live it. If something does not, release it. The Council does not seek agreement, it seeks coherence. From this point forward, let your life be the proof, not your words. The signal has done its work by returning you to what you already sensed beneath distraction. Stay with that. Backhand index pointing right type, I live coherence, to seal this stage of the Arcturian Council message. The Arcturian Council now delivers the final deep shock of this transmission, and it is deceptively simple. Nothing external is coming to save you from yourself. This is not a threat, it is liberation. The shock is realizing how often hope was projected outward, onto future events, people, revelations, or changes, instead of grounded inward as responsibility. Responsibility here does not mean blame, it means authorship. You are the one who decides how awareness is applied moment by moment. No cosmic event will replace daily honesty. No message will override lived choice. The Council affirms that this is not abandonment but empowerment. When you stop waiting for rescue, your energy consolidates. Attention sharpens. Agency returns. You do not need more information. You need consistent alignment with what you already know. Backhand index pointing right type, I take responsibility, to claim authorship over your awareness and actions. A quieter integration follows, almost tender in contrast to the earlier shocks. The Council reminds you that gentleness is not weakness, it is regulation. Many confuse intensity with depth and harshness with truth. The shock is discovering that sustainable clarity feels kind, not indulgent, but steady and humane. As you move forward, treat yourself as a system you are learning to operate skillfully, not an enemy to conquer. Rest when needed. Correct gently when you drift. Progress accelerates when self-violence ends. The Council notes that many advanced beings stall not from ignorance, but from unnecessary harshness toward themselves. Let compassion become functional, not sentimental. Backhand index pointing right type, I practice gentleness, to stabilize clarity through self-respect. Now the transmission narrows to a single operational truth: attention is your primary resource. The shock is recognizing how casually it was spent before, scattered across worry, comparison, anticipation, and regret. As awareness stabilizes, attention naturally gathers. You will notice less tolerance for meaningless consumption and more sensitivity to what nourishes or drains you. This is not discipline, it is preference refined by clarity. Guard your attention without rigidity. Where attention rests, reality organizes. This is not philosophy, it is observable. Watch what shifts when you choose where to place it deliberately. Backhand index pointing right type, I guard my attention, to protect and direct your most vital resource. The Council now offers a final recalibration of expectation. Integration will not feel dramatic tomorrow. You may wake up feeling ordinary. That is success. The shock is understanding that true transformation leaves you more human, not less. You will still navigate challenges, emotions, and uncertainty, but with less internal resistance. The signal has not elevated you above life, it has seated you more firmly within it. Let tomorrow be simple. Let choices be clean. Let presence guide you more than inspiration. This is how the transmission continues without effort. Backhand index pointing right type, I walk forward, to carry this awareness into ordinary living. This completes the Arcturian Council message, not as an ending, but as a return. A return to clarity, responsibility, gentleness, and presence. The final shock is realizing that nothing mystical was added, only distortion removed. You are left with what remains when noise fades, awareness capable of choice. From here, live quietly, honestly, and attentively. That is enough. The signal does not ask for devotion or repetition. It asks for embodiment. Let your life reflect what you have recognized. Backhand index pointing right, type, I embody the message, to seal and complete the full transmission.